from faculty East China Normal University. And today we will have the fifth episode of the Global Education Dean's Dialogue Series. And now I will leave the floor to our moderator, Dr. Lili from Department of Education, Faculty of Education, ECNU. Dr. Li, please.
Okay, then let's start. Sorry, we just had a little bit technical problems. That's why we need to prepare better for the future. So yeah, I think it tells us. Okay, yeah, and dear Professor Go, Professor Yang, and Dr. Zhu, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the dialogue series of our Global Education Dean's Forum, hosted by Faculty of Education, East China Normal University. Today, we will have the Dean's Vision of Shared Education Futures, the fifth lecture, and we are very honored and privileged to invite Professor Christine Guo, Director of the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, to give us a very interesting and significant topic on can we really prepare learners for the future. And meanwhile, we are also very honored to have two excellent emerging scholars, Professor Yang Lili and Dr. Zhu Yanzhen, both from School of Education, University of Hong Kong. And for this afternoon, the lecture will consist of three parts. First, Professor Guo will give the thematic lecture for around 20 to 25 minutes. And then Professor Yang and Dr. Zhu will give comments and extend this discussion for another 20 to 25 minutes. And then there will be a Q&A session. So please join me to warmly welcome Professor Guo to give her speech. Please, Professor Guo.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my slide first. Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see my slides. It is really nice to be here, and I thank colleagues for inviting me to share. I bring you greetings from the National Institute of Education, Singapore, and I hope that one day some of you will also be able to visit us. I have chosen a question for my topic or title of my talk because I thought it would be nice to have a question and we all try to think about our own answers in response to it. What I'll do in this 20 minutes that I have is to share with you my perspectives on preparing for the future, as well as to present to you a model that we use in NIE, which we call the 4 Life Learning Framework. And then I really look forward to the conversations with Dr. Yang and also Ms. Zhu and of course Dr. Li. So let me start now by saying that what is the future? Do we really know the future? I think most people will say we can't really tell what the future is going to be. So what's the point of preparing for it? How do we know we can prepare learners for the future when we don't know what it's going to be like? And in fact, it is true that there are many things that we don't know about the future. And in fact, many years, decades ago, scholars have already started talking about a world that is VUCA, right? And this is something that we're all very familiar with. And it is not something new. It is about almost 4 decades when this term was first coined. And the world, I mean, if we take the perspective of people living in the past, the future is always there, and there'll always be the elements of the unknown. And yet, for generations, we've had people who thrive in new environments in the future, or their future. So even though the world is VUCA, and we know it is, there are also many things that we may know and we can anticipate and prepare our students to embrace and face the future, including ourselves. Because I think when I was growing up, I was using a typewriter, and I had to learn to move to a word processor. That was my future at that point in time that I had to move into. So anyway, let's take a look at, I talked about typewriter and word processors. Let's take a look at how, technologies has disrupted our future, our present. I started with technology because most people will feel technologies as the biggest disruptor to our lives. And that has engendered a lot of conversations about how do we prepare for the future and so on. So this is a very quick representation of what some scholars would call the first industrial revolution, second and third, and now we're in the fourth industrial revolution. And the fourth industrial revolution seems to present us with even greater challenges. And that's because the lines between technology and the digital space and the biological space are now all blurred. Our smartphone is a good example of that, right? That affects us every day. Now, at the same time, we know there are certain things that are currently happening, and we do see some of these things going forward into the future. And these are just some examples that I've selected. We know we're living in a post-pandemic world, and we've already been told, prepare for the next pandemic, right? We know we are in IR 4.0. We know that we are beset with climate change challenges, and we're all concerned about sustainability. We're all concerned about our carbon footprints and caring for the environment. At least I hope most people will care for the environment. And for a long time, AI has been with us. For decades, scholars, researchers, scientists have been investigating AI, developing AI, trying to understand how our mind think, model it so that AI would also help to think the way we do. But now we know that AI can be a lot smarter than us in terms of some of the thinking. And we know there's been so much discussion, concerning generative AI. There's also the hope of the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, that gives hope to the world, to make the world a better place, to reduce inequality, more equity, embracing of more diversity, and so on. So these are just some examples of the present, and which we probably can look into the future as a continuation of some of these features. Now, when we talk about the future, invariably people will talk about work, right? You need to prepare for new ways of working. And this set of figures that you see here are not unfamiliar, I'm sure. A McKinsey report, it came out in 2017, it talked about mainly about North America, but we know that this is something that we begin to see in many parts of the world, including our own countries. Because of automation, a lot of work is going to be replaced. So people have to learn new skills, and we've been told learn new skills to be prepared for the future. And I think this is definitely a good advice for many people. But so let us take a look at, what are the skills that apparently are still needed. So this is another report from McKinsey published in 2016. And they rightfully pointed out that in the future, we will need higher cognitive skills because the basic cognitive skills are all can be automated. They are repetitive, can be automated, simple problem solving. There will be algorithms for that. So what we need to develop are higher cognitive thinking skills, such as, problem solving, complex problem solving, decision making, and so on. Social and emotional skills are also considered as important skills for the future workplace. Actually, social and emotional skills have always been important. As long as we have people that we interact with, we collaborate with, we learn to develop some of those skills in our interaction. But also at the same time, increasingly, we realize that we need to learn also to regulate our own social and emotional processes. Now, definitely technological skills are very important. From one end, we have, like in my case, is really learning to make use of my smartphone and use all the facilities that are there to help me do some of the things I want to do. Right to the other end, where there are people who devote their life, their career, to developing new skills and new tools to take us into a more advanced technological future. Then, according to the reports, there are some higher order skills that, apparently are least susceptible to automation. Managing others, and we could also add leadership, right, which is a little different from managing others. decision-making, planning, and creative tasks. I think in the last few years, we began to scratch our head and say, you know, AI is doing all these things that we thought only human beings can do. Writing poetry, doing art, well, art in inverted commas, right? And so, but what this means is that if we think about the future purely in terms of work, then there are definitely skills that we need to develop. And it is not wrong to think of our future that way. But to me, I think there's only one part of the future, which is the future of work. Now, the skills for the future have also been presented this way. And again, I think we're all quite familiar with these 21st century skills presented in these three categories: learning and innovation skills, involving creativity, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving. You see, these are all the high-level cognitive skills, right? And of course, communication and collaboration. Increasingly, we collaborate more. Why? Because technology enables us to do this. 10, 15 years ago, in order to collaborate, we have to take a plane and fly to a particular country to work with the people in that country for international collaborations. Now, we can do it through emails, through Zoom, through lots of technological facilities. And all the more, these are the skills that need to be developed. Life and career skills. These are important, but I really want to focus on the life skills because this is what is going to carry us through to the future, carry our students and other people along. Now, information, media, and technology skills are important. We know this. And to add to this, we need critical literacy skills that are applied to the media, to technology, and so on. You know, now we really have to discern what is truth and what is not untruth, what are lies. And these are things that our students need to learn as well. But increasingly, I think we need to add another skill there, and that is the skill of not being distracted. Because technologies distract us so much. And I think increasingly, we're going to see more of that technology intruding into our lives. And how do we manage that as we go forward with more and more such sophisticated technological tools that become inevitably a part of our life. Okay, so I've just presented some of the skills that, some authors have said are important for us. I would now want to just zero in on future-ready individuals or preparing individuals for the future. We know there have been a lot of publications, talks, opinion pieces, but I want to use this definition of future-ready individuals from my NIE colleague, David Ng, and his co-authors. It says that a successful education system is future-ready individuals who will continue to learn beyond graduation, take on future life work, and thrive in a changing society and environment. This is the definition of future-ready individuals. And the outcomes, the learning outcomes, as he said, must be aligned, must be dynamic and aligned to the new realities that we see. I will come back to this at the end of my talk. But based on this, I want to now move on into the NIE experience, which I put in abstract, said I would be sharing. Now, in NIE, about in 2017, we had an envisioning exercise. We knew that, in order to take teacher education and learning to the next bound, we must think about new ways of providing innovative pedagogies, but innovative pedagogies for what purpose, right? So we have determined that one way is to ensure that the plans that we do will work towards creating an NIE that is future ready. And in the work that we do, that we will help prepare our student teachers, our in-service teachers who come to us to be more future ready. And also in turn, they will be able to help their students. So there are many things we talked about briefly just now, to help us think about how to prepare for the future. One are skill sets. The other one that I have, you might have seen it implicitly stated there, is the mindset of how to embrace the future. So we felt that we really need to go back to basics. What is important is that we need to ask ourselves, what is learning for? And in order to understand that, we also need to step back and say, our students must see learning as purposeful, as meaningful. So I quote again from an NI colleague, Dennis Quack and his colleagues. Purposeful learning helps educators and learners to focus on the why behind the learning goals and ensure that students understand how things that happen in learning, in class, in terms of activities, experiences, and assignments relate to those goals. And I'll just pause here a bit. I think those of us who are in education, research about learning and so on, you will see that this links very much to metacognition of an individual able to discern, able to understand, able to plan, able to monitor, and evaluate things that they do against the bigger purpose of a learning task or a subject that they're learning. So Quack et al. Continues to say that there is increasing recognition that a purpose-driven life is important in the face of uncertainty. I think one of the things that we all agree about the future is that a lot of it is uncertain. Just looking back at the last 3 years, we know that how uncertain the future can be. So it is important, therefore, as far as learning is concerned, to help our learners see and understand why they're learning and how is that going to help make the things that they do, the work that they do, their experiences meaningful in the face of many uncertainties. So in this regard, I will then move on now to talk about the 4-life framework that we have in NIE. Now, lifelong, life deep, life wide are terms that are not unfamiliar to many people. Banks and colleagues from North America have written about it. But in our framework, we've added one component, which is life-wise. So these are the 4 learning components: lifelong, life deep, life wide, and life wise. Okay? So we all know about lifelong learning. Lifelong learning, again, is not something so new because we have had lifelong learners in every generation. People who feel that they want to learn more. They are not satisfied with what they know and they need to learn more, maybe to improve themselves, or maybe to help others, or maybe to move on, change a career, right? But lifelong learning has become so much at the forefront of our imagination and our consciousness in these last 10, 15 years because of the disruption of technologies. And because of that, many people say you need to start learning new things in order to get into new jobs. And we see that happening a lot because there are industries that have closed down and people need to move into a different industry. So they need to learn and retrain and reskill. But at the same time, I think lifelong learning is also at the core of it good for us as individuals, that we continue to learn, continue to deepen our understanding of the things that we want to discover. Now, this takes me to life deep learning. So life deep learning refers to mastery of content. So, for example, a discipline, whether it's physics or history or mathematics, in schools, it will be the subjects that students are learning. But mastering the content itself, to me, is just half the answer to learning. Because in every discipline, there is disciplinary thinking that is unique to that discipline. Students learn mathematics not just to memorize formulas and solve the problems and hand up exam sheets, but it is in those years of learning mathematics that they learn certain thinking, analytical thinking, problem-solving thinking, logical thinking, and so on. And somebody who is studying history will develop the thinking of looking at sources and comparing the sources before drawing conclusions. So I'm just giving you 2 examples. So life deep learning is not just about mastery of content, but it's also about deepening of the disciplinary thinking that we have. Life wide is very interesting, and it is probably the most interesting part for a lot of students because they don't just learn in the classroom or even in the school or in the college or university. they learn across. Now with technologies, it is so easy now to connect with people from other parts of the world. It's so easy to download a YouTube video and study it, use it, learn it, things that are beyond our immediate context and also beyond the immediate physical classroom. An important part of life-wide learning is that through these experiences, students, learners will be able to develop different perspectives about things. It is because in life-wide learning, we need to engage other people to help us learn. It is through these experiences of interacting with others, trying to understand other people, that we develop multiple perspectives. Even though we may not ourselves embrace all the perspectives, but we can help learners and learners themselves to develop, to hold multiple perspectives, to understand multiple perspectives and understand the thinking behind why people think in a certain way. Now, finally, and definitely not the least, is life-wise learning. Life-wise learning is basically the development of wisdom. It is the strengthening of one's character. And it is not just for oneself, it is also learning that goes beyond oneself. So we talk about ethics, values, moral virtues, and if you want to sum it all up, is the development of the character of that person. And it is so important when we're talking about the future. Already in the present, we find that there are a lot of problems because of a lack of ethical practice, ethical thinking. But at the same time, life-wise learning is also development of practical wisdom. For all of us, I think on Zoom today, I think we have gone through many different experiences in our lives. And the ability to reflect on those experiences help us to then develop new perspectives and new ways of acting and behaving and thinking. So these are important things to help our children, especially our young adults, our adolescents and teenagers, to develop to the ability to reflect on experiences, draw lessons, so that with wisdom, they can make better decisions in the future. It could be personal decisions. It could be a moral decision. And finally, and again, not the least important, and very important, is empathy. We say empathy is important, but at the same time, when we look around, a lot of things are happening in this world. We feel that maybe sometimes empathy is a little short in supply. And this is definitely something we need to develop among our learners, regardless of their ages. Now, what is anchoring all this is the social emotional regulation and the well-being of an individual. We can learn in different ways and so on and so forth, but unless we ourselves learn to manage our emotions, regulate our thinking, and very importantly, take care of ourselves, love ourselves, so that we can help and others. Unless we can do that, then a lot of this thinking will not be able to achieve the purpose that is intended. So this 4-life framework at NIE is anchored on the individual, social emotion regulation and well-being, but at the same time providing different processes of learning. So let me ask this question again. Can we really prepare learners for the future? I would say yes, we can. Although there's a cautious no about certain things. There's some things we don't know about, and we can't really prepare specifically for those things. I gave you the example when I first started, just now about me transiting from a typewriter to a word processor, and then increasingly more and more sophisticated word processing tools at that time we call them. But I think, like many of my peers, we transited because we had certain traits in us that want to learn, have the ability to learn something that is totally new, have the dispositions. And I believe that this is something that's not unique to one generation. This is something that everybody can develop. So in terms of preparing our learners for the future, I think yes, in terms of preparing the individual in terms of the skills, the dispositions, the mindsets, right? To prepare and embrace the future. Now, in the fourth industrial revolution, one of the questions that was constantly asked is, what defines us as humans? If the machines can do so many things that humans normally could do, does that mean that, they are humans and we are increasingly more or less humans? I think this is a very important question to answer. I'm not going to go into the details here, but I think we all know that there are some things that distinguish us from even the cleverest machines. And this begs, to me, a more fundamental question, because we're all educators here. What is the purpose of education? Is education just a means to deliver content to our students? Is education a means to tell them things? Many people, scholars have said education actually is a process of drawing out the best from each individual. And I think that the part about the individual, the humanness is very important. Mahatma Gandhi was the one who said, the gift of education is that we connect the children in the villages and the cities to all that is best in the country that the country can offer. So that's another way of looking at education. We have many ways of thinking about education, but I think that education is something that we need to really value, because it is for helping us to develop good human beings who not only have the skills, but also have the character to thrive in the next generation, in the future, in the years to come. Now, coming back to this particular framework, you see that in terms of the lifelong, life deep, life wide, it has a lot to do with the learning, the cognitive skills, developing certain even interactional skills. But I think what is unique, at least the way I look at it in the framework that we use at NIE, is this life-wise component. Although you can teach content, you can teach disciplinary thinking, that will not be complete if we think about the purpose of education. So, coming back to this quote from David Ng and his colleagues, a successful education system is able to develop future-ready individuals who will continue to learn. It's lifelong learning. Take on future life work, right? And in order to take on new work, new changes, we need to also have the content to apply into new contexts and to thrive in a changing environment. And I like to focus on the word thrive here. The word flourishing has been used a lot in recent years, human flourishing. I would say that thriving is really becoming a more fulfilled individual. It's not about making more money and going into work that, to reskill so that we can go to work and make more money. Of course, that is important in our survival. But to thrive as an individual in the future would mean that we and our learners will have the characteristics and the character to embrace the future and to be resilient, to be adaptable, flexible, creative, and at the same time, to also have ways of managing some of the challenges that come along. Now, learning outcomes are definitely important, but what we want to stress too is the process of helping learners to be more ready for the future. And so I hope that the brief explanation of the 4Life framework has given you just an idea into the kind of processes we are putting in place to prepare our teachers and also to prepare all other students and help them learn better in NIE. So can we really prepare learners for the future? I think you need to discuss with my panel members. So here are some references that some of you might be interested in. I just selected a few here, but I hope that you have found this very short sharing useful for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Goh, for giving us a very insightful presentation. Indeed, speaking of the future is always difficult, but it's very, very important. It is actually our understanding and anticipation to the future that greatly influence and even decide what we choose to do at present. So it's very interesting and it's very significant. And then we would like to invite our discussants, Professor Yang and Dr. Zhu, to give the comments and extend our discussion. So would Professor Yang go first? Or?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Guo, and thank you, Dr. Li. I really enjoy this fascinating and stimulating talk, which addresses a few fundamental questions of not only of education, but also our society and how we develop our society, including what is the future, what is the purpose of education, and many others. And as Professor Guo was sharing, that education is preparing future social members, and which is playing fundamental roles for the future of our societies. But in many cases, that education is being criticized by the general public, that it's being slow in changing, in preparing for the future. So I really appreciate this 4 life framework that highlights stay open in talking about future, preparing learners for the future, and emphasizing the common threads that run across generations and those essential skill sets. And here I think the skills is a really helpful approach to discuss how we can educate our students, but also we can be reflective about skills in terms of it's reducing what students are into people who possess a set of skills. So I really like this 4 life framework that goes beyond this skill only approach and employs a humanistic approach in discussing how we educate students. And I have 2 questions that I would really appreciate if Professor Guo would share your comments and thoughts on this. The first one is about the 4th dimension, life-wise dimension, which you have elaborated. But I noticed that this life-wise aspect also echoes with a lot of long educational traditional ideas. For example, the Confucian idea of 修身 self-cultivation, German Bildung idea, whole person education, so on and so forth. And all of a common element of all of these ideas is the emphasis on moral and ethical elements. And as Professor Guo was sharing, that this part is really difficult in practicing and implementing in reality. So I wonder if you could share with us how the 4 life framework is practicing this and further harness this aspect of education in relation to both educating students and also future teachers and in-service teachers. And my second question is more practical in terms of what kind of challenges Singapore is facing in applying the 4 life framework. For example, how we evaluate the effectiveness, the outcomes of this framework, the measurements and the practice, so on and so forth, and what other countries can learn from the Singapore experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yang. Those are excellent questions. And I would also like to hear the views of your views as well after this. But let me start by just saying very briefly that we apply these principles into the courses that we teach. There is a very intentional application of it. So, for example, of course, when the framework first came out in 2018, when we first launched it, it took a while for colleagues to, look at it, understand it, and then see what is it and how do we apply for it. But I would say that with some confidence, looking back now in 5 years, many departments, especially when they're talking to us and updating, they said when they are planning the work that they do for the various departments, they have these 4 life in mind when they are looking at the courses or reviewing a program and so on. I may not have time to play your video, but we have different courses that try to include all the different elements. But we have a course in Singapore called the Singapore Kaleidoscope, which is a course that all our students, student teachers take. And it is to help them develop a deeper appreciation for the things that are happening in Singapore, both the geopolitical situation as well as the flora and the fauna and in Singapore. So they don't only study in the classroom, they go out to the classroom. They also watch videos of interviews of people, not educators, not teachers, different walks of life, sharing about different perspectives. We also have in our teacher education program values, and I could include ethics as well as the underpinning principle of all the things that we do. So values are important when we're preparing teachers. So it's not just teaching them how to teach English, for example, right? But teaching them how to teach the person, the individual, and teaching them to develop themselves as teachers, as a member of the larger community of educators, valuing the students. So those are just some examples I can give you. And very recently, NIE and the Ministry of Education, we collaborated and we set up, just launched a few weeks, maybe a week ago, what we call the Singapore Center for Character and Citizenship Education. Now, before the center was set up, we already have these important components in the student teacher preparation programs. Also in the Singapore schools, CCE is a very important part of the school students' development. But I think starting out of the center, and as far as Singapore is concerned, shows the determination of the country in developing these aspects in the individual. Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay,
Professor Paul.
Okay, and yeah, please.
Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your insights, Professor Go, and very impressive and illuminating framework. And it just reminds me of the ancient Greek saying that change is the only constant in life. And I think it's still pretty much true for us. Because now we live in an era full of uncertainty, and the future is increasingly hard to predict. So maybe what education can do is not to tell learners what the future can be, but to help learners live a better life, no matter what the future would be. And I have also two questions. The first question is about the relationship between life education and cultural differences. Actually, now I'm in Boston for a conference, and I've met education researchers from different cultures all around the world. And it greatly shocked me that their perspectives are so diverse, maybe even on the similar topic. And they have quite different views on education and also lifestyles. And you mentioned empathy is in the dimension of life-wise, and I totally agree with you that empathy is more than important, both for individual development and for cross-cultural interactions. And as we all know, Singapore and Hong Kong are both, multicultural societies in Asia. So I'm just wondering if you have such an observation that people with different cultural or religious backgrounds may have different perceptions of life. If so, do you think for life framework can help people understand each other in a multicultural environment? And I'm really curious about how to promote the empathy in such multicultural environment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Zhu. Yes, sorry.
I also have a follow-up question, even maybe quite practical for early career education researchers, just like me. I think your insightful presentation actually has partly answered my question, but I just want to know, do you have any particular suggestions for early career researchers? I mean, what aspects or issues do you think education researchers should pay more attention to if we want to explore the uncertainty of future, especially in terms of education? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks for those two questions. And I just remember I probably didn't answer Dr. Yang's second question. But okay. First of all, multicultural societies. Yes, Singapore is definitely a multicultural society. I think we take great pride in the fact that we live harmoniously together. And a lot of that has to do with respect. And I would say empathy. That's why I said empathy is so important and such an important part of the LifeWise component of the 4Life framework. Will people with different religious and cultural views agree on some of these matters? I think I'm quite confident to say that a lot of the things that I've shared with you are not unique to one particular way of thinking. I think there's a lot of convergence in what will help make a better world, what will help make a better learner. I think in terms of that, there is this convergence, and so I don't see any issues in that. At the same time, I would say that some of the dimensions, like moral and ethical dimensions, regardless of, what perspectives we hold or what cultural background or religious background, those are important things. Integrity is something that everybody believes is important. So I feel that if anything, if we can help our learners develop some of these mindsets, dispositions, abilities, right, through this LifeWise dimension, it will actually further improve intercultural communication and intercultural understanding. And we know that those are very important parts of a society. With regard to research topics, I would still, if I come back to the 4Life framework, I think there are many many questions can still be asked. So, for example, if in terms of lifelong learning, we can investigate as to how are people approaching lifelong learning themselves? Do they see it? How do they value it? Do they see it as, oh, I have to do it because if not, I won't get a new job, and so on? Or what is their own attitude to it? Is it mainly a functional or instrumental view of lifelong learning, or is it something that is more personal and effective, right? View that it is for their own development. I'm just thinking of one example there. And also, I think in terms of educational research, what is important is that we don't just research one group of people, but I think if possible, there should be lots of different studies researching people at different stages of their lives. So we can start learning, researching about children, right? Understanding whether they have certain expectations or certain understandings of right and wrong. I think there's been research that's done that in that area. But at the same time is, what about the older people? What do we mean by empathy? And I think there are ways of, operationalizing that construct. But do people see empathy the same way? Is my understanding of empathy the same as somebody else's understanding of empathy? So these are just two examples to say that, when it comes to research on this 4Life, I think one way is to look at the lifespan of the learners and see what are the relevant gaps or questions to ask, right? The other one is to further interrogate some of these constructs that we use a lot. So empathy and wisdom, because I feel that if we can get a deeper understanding of how the idea of wisdom plays out in somebody's mind, then we will probably be able to understand more about how to help them and help ourselves develop some of those things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Yang and Dr. Zhu, for greatly deepening awareness and in this topic. And now We have several questions from our honorable audience. And I read questions for you all, for Professor Gore and for our invited guests. The first one is, hi, thank you very much for the sharing. It's really meaningful and inspiring. May I ask one question? How could teachers combine these wonderful ideas into everyday teaching when the assessment is mainly score-oriented? Sometimes I just find it too hard to put new pedagogies into practice. Thank you. The question from an audience called Yuan. First of all, or our discussants who will respond to the question.
I will start, and then maybe Prof. Yang and also Ms. Chu can chip in. I think first of all is, yes, I think we all recognize the pressure of assessment. Assessment also can serve many purposes. So one of the things I feel is important is to help teachers and even systems change the mindset about assessment. It is not assessment about how much someone has learned, but it can be assessment used for helping the person learn better, right? So I want to tackle that part about assessment first, because if teachers focus entirely on preparing students for examination, then they may find that there's not enough scope to explore the pedagogies for developing these things. How could teachers combine? Okay, so the 4 life components, it is not something that can be, I feel, in one lesson, you can't tackle all 4. But I think what is important is that in a program of studies, there should be different learning experiences for the students in order to develop and learn and imbibe these, these processes of life deep, life wide, and life wise. And certainly to plant in their ideas and help them, encourage them to think about learning as a lifelong process. This is particularly for our older learners in schools, high schools, and also in universities. Okay, I will pause here because I'm really interested to hear the views of Prof. Yang and also Ms. Chu.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. That's very kind of you, Professor Go. So I'm not expert in this field, but I think one way is to think in a different way of the relationship between this 4 life framework and what is going on currently in education, not to see them as conflicting as always, because if we assume that school teaching and learning is score-oriented, and this will influence negatively our practice in terms of ethical and skills and also many other aspects of preparing learners for the future, then we may think it in a more negative way. But I do understand that there are a lot of practical challenges and difficulties for in-service teachers. Maybe the first thing to rethink the relationship, and I think I get some inspirations from Professor Go's talk, is that there are teachers who are integrating these different dimensions into their daily teaching, not necessarily to have a separate class. For example, we teach ethics, we teach empathy, but to integrate it into our pedagogies. For example, how we teach, how teachers interact with students, and how to promote and facilitate students' communication between each other, particularly across culture, so on and so forth. And this might be an example of how that may be achieved.
I do agree that the student and teacher relationship is quite critical, because if we want to promote the life education, I think it should be maybe the exchange of life experiences between teachers and students, rather than a set of criteria or something like this. Maybe I think a long-term program would be better than just one class or just some like exams. So I think no matter education, both education practitioners and also our education researchers should pay more attention to individual perspectives and maybe also long-term research individual development.
Thank you for the kind of responses. Here comes more questions. This is for Professor Guo from Yan'an Normandy. Thanks for the kind sharing, Professor Guo. Can you comment on how will educators themselves are future ready? He means that whether how will educators themselves know that they are future ready, or will educators who are not future ready prepare students to be future ready? Yeah, that's.
Thank you, Dudley. So I think, first of all, it is important for us as individuals to reflect on where we are. So I like this question very much because it implies that, unless we ourselves know where we are, it is going to be very hard to lead the students to where we want them to go, right? So I think as all teachers, we have to examine our own beliefs. As teacher beliefs, what is it that we, in the first, even, what is it I believe about the future, right? Is this something that people are making a big, hoo-ha about? It's not a big thing. Or am I really concerned about the future and help my students because I care about them? I know the purpose of education. And if that's the case, then I need to see, am I developing the kind of mindsets? Am I developing new skills so that I can also be a role model for my students? Now, I think it was one of the education scholars, Feynman Namesel, said that, if we want our students to, I'm paraphrasing her, if we want our students to experience, powerful learning experiences, teachers must first of all themselves experience those things. Because unless teachers go through those experiences ourselves, it is quite unlikely that we are able to take our students there. Yeah, of course, I paraphrase her, but I think the general idea is, I agree with this, colleague who asked this question. We must examine ourselves. And if we are really serious about, helping our students go further, prepare them for the future, then we ourselves must be the role model.
Okay, thank you, Professor Guo. And we have for all of our from Lili Shijie. First one is it always correct to imagine the future based on current information? Second, how can schooling foster people who are relevant to the future based on current future vision? The third, what is the unique role of schooling in the development of children in the age of intelligence? Technology makes education ubiquitous, or the so-called the industry 4.0. Okay, so yeah, please.
Wow, there are quite a number of questions here. I was wondering if any of my colleagues would like to have a go first, maybe Prof. Yang or Ms. Chu, and I'll come in as well.
I'm happy to go first. I think this is an excellent question and really, thank you, and really important question. I really like what Professor Guo was framing it to keep open-minded in terms of what is the future. I don't think it's a good way or the correct way to imagine what the future would be like, because we would never be able to tell what the future would be like, because changing is the only one thing that doesn't change. If you also believe this or agree with me on this, so I think here is more in terms of what kind of skills, dispositions, and values that we can prepare students. When they face changes and uncertainties in future, they can be better prepared for those uncertainties and challenges and changes. I think that is the main point of this preparing learners for the future, rather than producing one prototype of learners or for the one prototype of future.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much. I really like that idea as well. There's no one prototype or even one size fits all, right? Maybe something about the schooling. I'm not sure if I got the question completely, but what's the role of schools, right? If there are all these things happening, is that the general idea of the question? Yeah. So I think there are, in fact, this has been asked many times, what are subjects that are worth learning in this unpredictable future? In fact, I've got a book right here that I picked up some time ago. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. It's called Future Wise. It's by David Perkins. And in this book, he talks about, what the expanding universe of what's worth learning. So he talks about, what are life-worthy learning in the current situation? Do you still learn the same subject disciplines, or do you go beyond? And basically he's saying we need to go beyond. We need to go beyond what we're doing currently, whether it is in the curriculum content or the way we use the content, or whether it is in the perspectives that are narrow, and we need to go bigger. So the key word in this book that I picked up from, life-worthy learning is we need to go beyond. So if we're preparing for the future, while we don't know what the future is, we must also try and anticipate some of the changes and to see whether our current curriculum will need to go beyond what we have been doing in the last 10 years or 15 years and help students develop skills, ways of thinking that will help them for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Zhu, please.
Yeah, I think both Dr. Yang and Professor Go's answers are quite inspiring for me to rethink how to understand the future, because we are all just human beings. We can't directly or just precisely to predict the future. But I think the most important ability for human beings is to imagine the future. And I really like what Professor Go said this term. We can go beyond not only what we know right now, and also go beyond ourselves. I mean, when we imagine the future, in fact, we are also go beyond ourselves. We can look forward, and also we can open up any kinds of opportunities, not only for ourselves and also for other people, especially for education practitioners or education researchers. So we can open all kinds of also possibilities for maybe for children or even for maybe older people, everyone who want to know more how to live better in the future can gain some maybe some useful tips or gain some useful insights for their future life. I think this is the most important thing for us to maybe for us to explore education issues, and also to explore how to make our education practices can better benefit other people.
Thank you very much for insightful responses. Here we have one more question, and well, it is always very difficult for a moderator to say, well, this is probably the last question for today due to the time limit. The question is that thank you all for inspiring sharings. I'm wondering how the 4 life framework can be adaptively applied to learners from different social groups, focused on the class, social, economic background, gender. I hope my question makes sense. Appreciate your answers. So yeah, we would like to invite all of our guests to respond to this question, and then we conclude the lecture.
Maybe I could go first. This question that concerns a fundamental issue in education, that is equity in education, and how we can make sure that students from different backgrounds, including social economic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, gender backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, that they can all benefit in a more rather equal way from education. Perhaps one thing is not this is not only about for life framework, but overall educational system and how education system interacts with society. There are some fundamental issues like inequality of educational resources and the inequality of access to education. I think what for life framework can do is more related to the resources, for example, and classroom content and pedagogies, maybe through training teachers, to providing materials, content, and for teachers to facilitate and promote support teachers' innovative and original contribution into their implementation of for life framework is really important. But then that connects with another challenge, is how we make sure that the high quality teachers are evenly or in a rather even way distributed into different types of schools. But I think that is more sort of an overall design of educational system. But with such a ideal system, then I think the for life framework will play an important role in preparing learners for the future.
Ms. Zhu, do you have anything to add?
Because I'm still keep thinking about this question, and actually because now I'm attending a conference, and equity is a hot and also classical topic in our conference about education and also international education. Yeah, I think it's about the purpose of education. There is always the problem, how to balance the equity and efficiency in education. How to take all consideration, no matter research or education programs, something like this. So I think this question is quite challenging, but I think the first step is to take have such kind of awareness of the diversity of social groups. We need to keep attention to those different social groups, and then maybe education has many things to do in the future. For education researchers, we need to, when we develop or when we apply some education theories, we need to keep attention to this diversity. And also, maybe I'm not an expert on education practices, but I think many education practitioners have made a lot of effort to take all these groups in education practices and to benefit, try to benefit more different social groups. Yeah, I think it's a question for our education, maybe always a question for our education researchers and practitioners, and also a question about future. What can we do in the future? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will just maybe wrap up this part. I think those are really very good questions. In fact, there's so many parts. I think, my colleagues have really answered them very well. I just have one point to add, and that is, in all this, the teacher is the most important. Whether it is the teacher in the school or the teacher in the university. So whether, the for life framework is the NIE's experience, and I have shared it with you. But in different institutions, there will be different approaches to making sure that teaching and learning becomes effective and meaningful. So I said the teacher is most important. And so I would think that, we must provide the resources, right? And the opportunities for professional development. I think for teachers in school, sometimes they go for professional development classes and so on, and sometimes it's the teachers in the universities who really need more opportunities for professional development. And I think this is something that we all need to think about more. And I constantly think about that too. And in NIE, we do have, a center called Innovations in Learning Center to help our faculty members improve their pedagogies, and also to translate some of the ideas about innovative pedagogies into tangible objects that can be implemented, whether it's, IT or something else. So the teacher is the most important in preparing for the future. And so in NIE, that's why you remember, the line that I had is, a future-ready NIE, preparing future-ready teachers and students. So the teachers must be ready. And then they have this multiplier effect when they go into the classroom, not just by words, but also by the way they behave and the beliefs that they articulate to the students.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have enjoyed very much the time sharing of the wisdom from our distinguished speaker, discussant, and our audience. And finally, I would also express my personal gratitude to all of you, because I studied history. I studied Chinese history at the Chinese University of Hong Kong for my degrees, which means that previously I cared more about the past. But today you all greatly enlightened me the significance of future perspective and the future's literacy. Thank you very much. And thank you also for your continuous attention to the series of academic activities organized by the Faculty of Education, East China University. And we look forward to host you in person in Shanghai in the near future. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Miss Zhu, anything.
And Ms. Zhu, thank you so much. And thank you for the audience.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Then we call this a day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Many thanks to people who join us here. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.